barman drew Walt's drink, pushed it at him, and leaned upon his bar top, sucking his teeth, staring steadily and sightlessly out into the dancing roadway. "Hot," said Walt, sipping. "I just came down over those northward hills, and it's 30 degrees hotter here than up there." The barman's eyes grated in their sockets as they swung to consider Walt. They seemed to become mildly interested. "Been like this for near 30 days now," the barman said. "All it'd take to send this whole blessed country up in smoke would be one dropped cigarette, one spark off a spur rowel." The barman reached for Walt's emptied glass. Walt said, "No more. One's enough for now." He half turned, ran an indifferent glance over the room where all those listless riders and merchants sat, turned back, and studied the barman. "Makes for short feed and dry water holes," he said. "Yeah, it also makes for short tempers, stranger. You can almost feel it in the air, sort of like electricity." Walt left the Dallas house to amble over toward the Sunflower Hotel. There were a number of things a man fresh off the trail wanted when he hit town. Cool beer and a bed up off the ground were usually the first two, and usually in that order. He got a room, went up to it, and cleaned up after removing his shirt. He scrubbed himself, put the shirt back on, and returned to the shimmering roadway to stroll along in the shade of the overhang to study Sunflower. He wound up on the same side of the road as the livery barn, checked in there to see how his horse was faring, then passed along to the Capitol Variety House, which was several doors south of the barn and nearly opposite from the Dallas house, being several buildings southward. Here he went in, noticed the same listlessness among the saloon's idling patrons, and headed over to the bar. A thick-set man over by the saloon's roadside front window turned and watched as Walt halted, nodded at the barman, and said, "Cold beer." Then the thick-set man came completely around, his gaze even and steady. "He don't want no beer in here," that man said quietly, his words carrying easily to every man in that sweaty room. Walt turned, measured the thick-set man, read the leashed violence in that rough, bronzed face, and seemed both puzzled and careful. He sensed rather than saw all the other masculine faces in the room turning to look him up and down. He was reasonably certain he'd never before seen that thick-set man. He knew for a fact this man was no particular enemy of his for two reasons. One, that tough face was totally unfamiliar. Two, Walt Hodge was new in Arizona. He was a Nevadan, in fact, who had trailed a band of 80 horses to Whipple Barracks for the Army. It had been his intention to loaf a little, then head back to Nevada. He had a little money in the belt under his shirt, and was therefore in no hurry to brave the fierce summer's scorch just yet. After considering that thick-set man for a while, he said, "Mister, I think you made a mistake. I never saw you before in my life." Behind Walt, the bartender called over to the thick-set man. "Who is he, George?" "One of them," George shot back, holding Walt's full attention with his malevolent stare. "I seen him come out of the Dallas house a while back." Walt saw the others in that room turn carefully attentive. One of those heretofore quiet men, a solidly muscular, bitter-lipped man in his mid-30s with a dusty Stetson on the back of his head and an ivory-butted six-gun lashed to his right leg, strolled forward for a closer look at Walt. He said, "You aren't very smart, cowboy, walking in here figuring we wouldn't know." "Know what?" asked Walt, coming fully around, setting his back squarely to the bar, facing this bitter-lipped man and all the others. "Maybe he doesn't know," said a lanky, slow-moving range man as he pushed up from one of the card tables. "Where are you from, mister?" "He knows," said George from back by his window. "He was in the Dallas house long enough. They put